You remember lesson about balance. Lesson not just karate only. Lesson for whole life.
And welcome to the Ruby Tuesday. My name is Ruben, and this is my review for Netflix's Cobra Kai Season 1 and 2. Although technically it's not Netflix's, it was a YouTube original, but now Netflix have bought the rights to it and they're going to have exclusive rights to Season 3. So I thought it would be a great time to talk about Cobra Kai Season 1 and 2. Decades after their 1984 All-Valley Karate Tournament bout, a middle-aged Daniel LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence find themselves martial arts rivals again. There are certain films that, if you love 80s films or you grew up in the 80s, that there are certain films that you shouldn't touch, really. It's sacrilegious to even think about making a sequel to it. Such films are like The Goonies, Back to the Future, which thankfully there's a massive ironclad clause to not make another Back to the Future movie. Hopefully that will always stay that way. And so when it came to The Karate Kid, seen more films being made in this franchise and them not being done well. So as far as I'm concerned, there are 3 Karate Kid movies. The first one's great, the second one's okay, and the third one is, you know. And then there is the next Karate Kid, which we will not talk about. And then there is the Kung Fu Kid, Judo Kid, which, yeah. And so when they announced making Cobra Kai, I was excited but worried about, like, will this be any good? Especially that, how can you get the same nostalgia but still make it relevant for today and still have the same characters do what they did best? And the way you do that is this. And I have to say, if you're a person that loves that sort of nostalgic, that nostalgia from the 80s, and you get gripped by stories like The Karate Kid, I would suggest mapping out yourself a long time to watch this, because once you start, you're not going to want to put it down. It is really that good. They managed to somehow capture the magic of the 80s, make it relevant for now, and still have you really invested in these characters. It's so long since that All-Valley tournament, and the rivalry for some reason is still strong, and that's what plays a big part in these 2 seasons. And so you have the new students on either side as the series progresses. Season 1 and 2, you have a daughter from Daniel LaRusso who, you know, is very involved in his relationship, and of course then there's Miguel, who is in the Cobra Kai side, and you see these relationships mash, and you see the way they kind of combine these storylines again. It's almost reflective of what happened in Karate Kid 1, where there are, you know, they cross each other's boundaries, and what happens in those boundaries forces them to interact with each other in a very violent way. And so you get the martial arts that reminds me a lot of the type of martial arts we saw in the Karate Kid. So there's no like wires, there's no like ninjas, there's no flying. It's very relatable. These are human beings being taught how to defend or how to attack. And so the martial arts itself is not always like John Wick style. It shouldn't be. They're students, but it is always believable and it is always fun. What I love about this series is the editing as well. The way they tell the story, it's often interspliced with what's going on with the other rivalries. The way it starts each episode is very interesting. I love the way that you kind of get what's going to happen within each episode within those first few seconds. They're also not afraid to be creative with some of the themes. They very much have the 80s nostalgia soundtrack in there, but also make it relevant for today. There is some really, really tense moments, but I love how it keeps building. So although it takes you on that nostalgic journey of what has happened to these characters, they introduce new students that you can't help but relate to. But the most difficult thing about watching this series is how you like both sides. So for me, when I originally watched The Karate Kid, for me it was quite clear who the bad guys were. But if you go back now with this mindset, with the Cobra Kai in the background, you do ask yourself the question, and this is an argument that's been going on for a very long time with fans. Was Daniel actually the bully? He did the illegal kick. You know, it's this argument that people are talking about, which is why the Cobra Kai was birthed, this series. And it didn't really find a massive audience on YouTube. Everybody that had seen it were definitely championing this series and said, you gotta watch it. Thankfully now Netflix have it, and it's immediately jumped to the #1 spot, at least in the UK. I think in the US as well, it's jumped to the #1 spot. It's just watched, it's loved. There is an amazing balance this series creates for nostalgia people who love 80s, but also for a generation of now, bringing them into this fantastic franchise. Well, it is a franchise now, from the Karate Kid movies to the series to, you know, I'm guessing merchandise that's everywhere from the Cobra Kai franchise now. Definitely going to get more of this, but I'm so impressed with this series, from the character developments, from the students who have really complicated backgrounds. As we dive deeper into these students' backgrounds, you can't help but really like their characters. You see cleverly how the writers have matched up certain characters to interact with each other. You do get where the story is going to go for a lot of the series, and you kind of are hoping that it doesn't. It's a profoundly sad story as well, because you wish these guys would just be able to sit down and have a conversation with each other and sort each other's rivalries out. You hope that they would just end up being best friends, because it looks like they have so much in common. You know, these two dojos don't need to be at each other's throats, but because of what happens, because of history, because of certain other characters, which I'm not going to talk about because it'll be good for you to find out what happens there with those characters, you see them push buttons and kind of create a nastiness that drives these two dojos together. And so what we get at the end of season 2 is something big that you could expect that was coming, without doing spoilers again. And it leaves us going, oh my god, what's going to happen next? So thankfully Netflix has picked up this series. We are getting a season 3. It's official. It should be coming sometime in 2021, depending on what COVID has done with the production of filming and, you know, writing scripts, all of that. This series does everything for a fan that you want it to. It has that nostalgia, has a reminiscence of certain characters, certain moments. It's expertly edited for that zone, but it also brings a new kind of generation into this. So I feel like sons and daughters of any age really can really get around and enjoy this. It's a lot of fun to watch. I was surprised at how nostalgic I felt during watching this. I felt like it could have been an 80s series. Had I watched this series in the 80s, it would have felt right, even though it's set in the time period now. It just fits really well. And the balance to do that right, the balance of getting nostalgia and getting the filming techniques to bring it into a generation now, is something that is really difficult to do. And a lot of films and TV series fail at that. You know, there are so many I could mention that I won't, that just didn't get it right. But I felt like, wow, this got it right. It's fantastic. Definitely worth a watch. Stick it on your Netflix playlist. Don't judge it for its slight cheesiness, because there was always cheese with the Karate Kid, and it needed to have that. But I have to give it to the actors. You know, they've come back to their characters, taken it to new depths. The new actors for the younger generation are fantastic and really interesting to watch. You believe their plight. You're on everybody's side mostly. Which is a difficult thing to do. The writers purposely put you in the shoes of both sides, and then you kind of have to think, well, who do I support? Which is a really conflicting emotion to have when you're wanting to choose one side, and it's difficult to choose whose side you're on. I'd be interested to know if anybody has chosen the side. Who are you guys rooting for? There are sometimes I just felt like Daniel was a douchebag, and then the opposite happens as well. So, yeah. It's a very human look at the story, showing both sides of the story, which is always a story that needed to be told. I think it's fantastic. I'm going to give this an A+. Let me know in the comments below what you thought about this. But most of all, until next time, remember, live long and Tuesday.